This video is scripted and edited and written by Nehor Dash. This video is scripted and edited and written by Nehor Dash. 15 types of ancient clock which written by Nehor Dash for public domain purpose only used by people in past ages to keep the time running. Figuring out time is so easy today, right? Just have a look at the clock and there you go. Well, people of medieval and ancient ages also used to do the same, though their methods were more demanding. Time identifying was a task in itself for them as, at times, they also needed to perform some calculations. Water clock, cannon clock, hourglass, people have tried multiple methods for identifying the time in past. As their needs increased, they developed more and more innovative methods to find solutions to their problems. These old-fashioned clocks served their purposes, at a time when no one needed to run to their offices. Though we won't find them easy to use now, these clocks are surely fascinating. Have a look and find out how many of these clocks you knew before. So here is our list which written by Nehor Dash for public domain purpose only. 1 Sundials 1 Sundials 1 Sundials 1 Sundials. They were one of the first instruments to be used for dividing up a day. It was used to divide up the day from sunrise to sunset to 12 equal parts. But, as the name tells, this clock was only useful in the daytime. It used the shadow of an object exposed to the sun. And, as the sun went through its progressions throughout the day, it ultimately caused the shadow of the object to move and ultimately tell time. A picture of a sundial to better elaborate different types of clocks used in ancient time. Different types of clocks used in ancient time. The sundial is considered the very first device that was used by the ancient people to figure out the time. The world's oldest sundial is the Valley of King, which dates back to 1500 BC, but some say that the history of sundials started way before that. There were different types of sundials that were used. Some made of stones and other made of wood. Want to know more about sundials? To the water clock. To the water clock. To the water clock. One of the very first devices used to measure time was the water clock back in the 5th century BC. To elaborate, some amount of water was put in a vessel that was allowed to escape through a hole in the bottom. The time determined varied according to the size of the vessel and the hole made at the bottom. A picture of an ancient water clock to better elaborate different types of clocks used in ancient time. It was all before we had the liberty of wearing fancy clocks on our wrist, or even the scientific knowledge to make the atomic clock, which helps function the internet as well as the GPS system properly. So, how was it possible for anyone to maintain some kind of a schedule? The very first things were sundials, which made it possible to navigate through time, but they only worked in the daytime. So, Egyptians thought of making a time measurement device using the most common liquid around, water. They were educated enough to know that as the level of water in a container drops, the outflow of the stream coming out of the hole made will also drop. 3 The candle clocks. 3 The candle clocks. 3 The candle clocks. This came to be in China in near 500 AD. An example of how it worked is that as the candle burnt down whilst the passing of the day, the time would be determined by seeing how much the candle has already burnt and which mark it has crossed. To further elaborate, here is a picture of the candle clock. Then came the mechanical clocks in the 14th century, which soon became the standard. It started off by having a weight hanging from a pulley that turned the gear the single hand, which indicated the hours as well as the portions of the hour. Then came the spring-wound clocks in the 15th century. This was around 1400 AD when quartz springs began to be used in clocks. And as most of the locksmiths were also clockmaker, hence they were simultaneously introduced in clocks too. 4 The sandglass. 4 The sandglass. 4 The sandglass. Probably the most famous of ancient clocks, and there is a high chance you have at least seen it. The sandglass consists of 2 glass bulbs which are vertically connected with a narrow neck. The neck allows some amount of sand to pass through the upper glass to the lower glass. Usually, the upper and lower glasses are exactly alike, so the sandglass would measure the exact same time regardless of its orientation. A picture of a sunglass clock. The first sandglass clock is said to have been made by a French monk named Laprant during the 8th century AD. The sandglass clock is also known as the hourglass, as it could only tell when an hour was up. They were used to set off blocks of time, and hence, they were all designed to measure 1 hour. Nowadays, if you wish to buy an hourglass sandglass for decor, there are some that cost thousands of dollars due to their unique history. 5 astronomical clocks. 5 astronomical clocks. 5 astronomical clocks. An astronomical clock is a type of clock that displays astronomical information to whoever that takes a glance. It tells information like the relative position of the sun, the moon, and sometimes even major planets. The clock uses zodiacs to represent months. These zodiacs are present inside the time dial. Also, to project the movement of the Earth, the clock usually features the time dial in the center of the clock. Fun fact, the very first mechanical clock that was created by Ising in 723 AD was also an astronomical clock. A picture of the Prague Astronomical Clock. To better answer what is an astronomical clock? All about them. What is an astronomical clock? All about them. The oldest functional astronomical clock is well over 600 years old and is named as the Prague Astronomical Clock. It has nonetheless stopped working a few times and was repaired to keep the functionality intact. Most of the astronomical clocks out there have a 24-hour analog dial around the edge, and the current time is told by a picture of the sun or a ball at the end of the pointer. If you want to know even more about astronomical clocks, click here. There are many variations when it comes to astronomical clocks, but there are some commonalities that are present in all astronomical clocks. What are these things that all astronomical clocks have in common? Let's have a look into them. 6 pendulum clocks. 6 pendulum clocks. 6 pendulum clocks. This was a big jump in the clockverse when we talk about accuracy. This clock became popular through the famous scientist Galileo and was the most accurate type of clock till 1930. It was officially first invented by Christian Huygens. A picture of a pendulum to better elaborate different types of clocks used in ancient time. A pendulum is the main timekeeping element of a pendulum clock. Clock pendulums are usually made out of weights suspended on a wood rod or a metal rod. In better clocks, the weights are usually heavier as it increases the accuracy of a pendulum. The pendulum is kept in its momentum with the help of an escapement. Each time the pendulum swings through its center position, it releases one tooth of the escape wheel. 7 Mondial. 7 Mondial. 7 Mondial. Mondial is most of us are already aware of the sundial, but what about the Mondial? A mondial comprises a moon table which connects the phase of the moon to the apparent lunar time based on the moonlight. 8. The Murket. 8. The Murket. 8. The Murket. A Murket, Science Museum, London. The Murket or Murket, ancient Egyptian, MRT, instrument of knowing, 1, was an ancient surveying and timekeeping instrument. It involved the use of a bar with a plumb line, attached to a wooden handle. 2. It was used to track the alignment of certain stars called decans or bakshiyu in the ancient Egyptian. When visible, the stars could be used to measure the time at night. There were 10 stars for the 10 hours of the night. The day had a total of 24 hours including 12 hours for the day, 1 hour for sunset, and 1 hour for sunrise. Murkets were used to replace sundials, which were useless during the dark. 9. The Incense Clock. 9. The Incense Clock. 9. The Incense Clock, simplified Chinese. Traditional Chinese. Pinyin, Zhngzhng. Wade Giles, Sing Chung. Lit fragrance clock is an Indian timekeeping device that was popularized in China during the Song dynasty, 960 to 1279, and spread to neighboring East Asian countries such as Japan and Korea. The clock's bodies are effectively specialized sensors that hold incense sticks or powdered incense that have been manufactured and calibrated to a known rate of combustion, used to measure minutes, hours, or days. The clock may also contain bells and gongs which act as strikers. Although the water clock and astronomical clock were known in China, example, Susong, incense clocks were commonly used at homes and temples in dynastic times. 10 oil lamp clock. 10 oil lamp clock. 10 oil lamp clock are clocks consisting of a graduated glass reservoir to hold oil, usually whale oil, which burned cleanly and evenly, supplying the fuel for a built-in lamp. As the level in the reservoir dropped, it provided a rough measure of the passage of time. 18th century oil lamp clock. The principle behind such a timekeeping device is that it measures a quantity that either decreases or increases at a constant rate. Lamps or candles, burning fuel at a steady pace, fit this category, and as a bonus produce useful light. Hourglasses depend on the steady draining of fine sand through a small aperture. Water clocks or clepsydra measure a gain or loss of water by using drops of uniform size and frequency. The Persian Fengen made use of the constant time it took for the sinking of a floating bowl with a hole in its underside. It is unknown when or where the oil lamp clock was first introduced. This clock was mainly used during the mid-18th century. 11. The Persian Fengen is another type of water clock. The larger bowl is filled with water, and the smaller one is placed into the water. The smaller bowl has a hole in it, so it slowly sinks, and when it is fully submerged, that is 1 unit of time. The Persians used them to time how long each farmer was allowed to access the irrigation system. 12. The elephant clock. 12. The elephant clock. 12. The elephant clock was a model of water clock invented by the medieval Islamic engineer Ismail al-Jazari, 1136–1206. Its design was detailed in his book, The Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices. The elephant clock, in a manuscript by al-Jazari, 1206 AD, from upon finishing the development and construction of his elephant clock, al-Jazari wrote, "The elephant represents the Indian and African cultures, the 2 dragons represent Chinese culture, the phoenix represents Persian culture, the waterwork represents Greek culture, and the turban represents Islamic culture," expressing his multicultural mentality. 13. Obelisk. 13. Obelisk. 13. Obelisk. Obelisks can be considered as huge structures made up of concrete which also act as a sundial. They are still commonly seen in Renaissance countries. 14. Church bells. 14. Church bells. 14. Church bells. Church bells. Church bells have always been a popular time tracking system, yet we rarely discuss them. Till date, there are many bells tolling every day and telling time to people. 15. Big Ben. 15. Big Ben. 15. Big Ben is the nickname for the great bell of the striking clock at the north end of the Palace of Westminster in London. It is the world's largest clock, which situated in England. 1. And the name is frequently extended to refer also to the clock and the clock tower. 2. The official name of the tower in which Big Ben is located was originally the Clock Tower, but it was renamed Elizabeth Tower in 2012 to mark the Diamond Jubilee of Elizabeth. The tower was designed by Augustus Pugin in a neo-Gothic style. When completed in 1859, its clock was the largest and most accurate 4-face striking and chiming clock in the world. 3. The tower stands 316 feet, 96 m, tall, and the climb from ground level to the belfry is 334 steps. Its base is square, measuring 40 feet, 12 m, on each side. Dials of the clock are 22.5 feet, 6.9 m, in diameter. All 4 nations of the UK are represented on the tower on shields featuring a rose for England, thistle for Scotland, shamrock for Ireland, and leek for Wales. On the 31st of May 2009, celebrations were held to mark the tower's 150th anniversary.